Sounds like it.
It is.
Hope you've enjoyed the day so far. I certainly have. Had some great speakers and had a walk round. Managed to grab some lunch, unlike me. So I'll just introduce you to Lauren and Georgette. Lauren and Georgette are diabetes specialist dietitians based at Royal Southampton Hospital in Southampton. So over to you guys.
Thank you. I just need to lift that back up. Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Yes, lovely. So, yeah, recognise some familiar faces. So thank you to those that have already popped by our stand. We're in the main exhibition area. Just going to do a little plug that we are doing a little prize draw today. So if you come and guess the amount of carbs in our jar today, you can win a year's subscription to the Carbs and Cows app. So do come and say hello after the session and have a little guess, because it's got as good a chance as anybody of winning, because nobody knows the answer. It's quite tricky. So yeah, we're going to talk today just generally about living well, healthy eating in the current climate. Perhaps a little bit of a focus on sustainable diet, so eating for the saving the planet, but also bearing in mind the cost of living crisis and the fact that food is getting much more expensive, and often there's this perception that eating healthily is often very expensive. So we'll be exploring that in a little bit more detail.
So the three main topics that we plan to discuss today is living well with different lifestyles, so thinking about family and diabetes, work, stressful day-to-day life, and how we can link up for healthy eating guidelines with this lifestyle. Is it actually possible to have a healthy diet on a budget? So talking about some food and shopping tips, and we'll play a game of shopping basket, higher and lower. And then we'll be talking throughout about food psychology as well, because we're very aware that sometimes we might know what we need to do, but actually there's so many things that can impact on whether we're actually able to take that next step in that healthy change.
So we know that we're more than just what we eat. There's a lot of why do we do the things that we do? We're often creatures of habit, and lifestyles can often vary and kind of make it harder to follow some of the healthy eating principles. So kind of maybe some of the things that you're all trying to juggle, I'm going to ask a few questions, so just raise your hands. How many of you maybe are juggling kind of childcare, that could be grandchildren or children, looking after young children, or working shift patterns, having a long distance relationship, studying alongside working, kind of enjoying any financial stress, kind of all these things that we're trying to juggle. All these things that we're trying to do can affect kind of the decisions that we're making. So sometimes people say, but I really don't have time for lunch, so I have to have something quick, or I skip lunch because I'm really busy at work, or I'm quite stressed when I get in and I'm hungry and I know I need to wait for dinner, but I can't stop snacking at that sort of time of day or in the evening. So we're trying to give you some practical advice today to try and navigate all of that stuff that we've got going on in our lives, and give you some advice on breaking some of those habits as well. So let's get cracking.
So we'll start off thinking, actually, what is a healthy diet with diabetes? There can be lots of different answers to this. There's lots of different dietary approaches to managing diabetes. So we could have people that might follow a low-carb approach. Some people might be on a calorie-controlled diet, which could be at different levels. There might be some people on very low-calorie diets, up to 1,500, 1,800 calorie diets. And it's really starting to think, actually, the approach that you choose, is that working for you? Is that something you could see yourself doing 6 months down the line? And if the answer's no to that, then you do have to think, actually, is this the right dietary approach for me? Because you may be setting yourself up to fail if you're choosing something that doesn't fit in with everything else that you're doing day to day. Or it could be, for example, if you're trying to reduce down on your carbohydrates, have we actually reduced them down so low that you're actually feeling a bit miserable with following that diet, and think, actually, if I up that level just a little bit, then you might be a lot happier and actually think this could be a long-term change that might reach your goals steadily. So sometimes it's not always a race to meet those goals. Sometimes doing it steadily works a lot better. And also thinking about, is your diet affordable and sustainable today in 2024? So thinking about lots of different aspects, like does your diet fit in with your budget? So I'm skipping ahead. is the food available for your diet? So now thinking about with the price increases with our food, there might be more availability of certain types of food, and some will cost a lot less than others. So it might actually mean, do we need to start adapting recipes? Does it fit in with your working pattern? Do we need to think a bit differently with how we might spread our calories across the day? Do I need to be supplementing my diet? Sometimes things can cost lots of extra money, but we want to know if we're investing our money in the right way. And does it work for your whole family? Are we all on different types of diets? Is there anything we could do to merge them all together to, again, save money and also to keep our sanity with our diet and healthy eating?
So are you all familiar with the Eat Well guide? Have you all seen this before? So I'm going to put a caveat around this and give it some context. This isn't necessarily designed for people living with diabetes. It's a health population tool. So in the kind of amounts that they're shown here, it is aimed at more healthy younger population who maybe perhaps don't have a long-term condition. But we can still use it to remind ourselves about why we eat the foods that we do and why those health promotion messages are out there. So I'm going to just quickly whiz round and just do a little bit of carb awareness as well, and particularly focusing on carbohydrates, because for diabetes these are the main nutrients that affect your blood glucose levels. And sometimes we're really familiar. If I was to ask you all to shout out the name of a carb, what's the first thing that all comes into your head? Just shout out the first carb. Bread. So, predictably, which I think most people are aware of, we're all aware of the starchy carbohydrates in our diet. And where possible, we recommend choosing whole grain versions because they're higher in fibre. But the amount that you need will vary. So I can't tell just by looking at you how many carbohydrates you need to consume on a daily basis. So we'd have to have a bit of a conversation to find out how active you are, what job you do, what your hobbies are. Do you have any limiting injuries or conditions that affect your mobility levels? To be able to kind of recommend a specific amount. But we do know that Diabetes UK sort of endorse lower carb diets to be less than 130 grams per day. But just be careful, because sometimes when people say low carb diets, they might also be talking about keto diets. And that's not something we're necessarily recommending. It works for some people, but can be a lot more restrictive. So why do we eat carbohydrates? They give us B vitamins, they give us fibre, and they help keep our bowels regular. So we don't advocate cutting them out completely because of the health benefits, but where possible, choose whole grains. And I'll talk a little bit more about portion size in a minute. So, anyone, now we've done the starchy carbs, can anyone think of any other carbs that might be on that picture?
Pasta.
So outside of this group, so we've done the rice, potato, pasta, cereals, oats.
Bananas.
Banana crisps, yeah, I've had 2 answers there, banana. So we'll move on to this section next because someone said banana and that's in the next section. Are you aware that all fruits contain a natural sugar? Yeah? So lots of health benefits, again, from eating lots of fruit and veg. They've got the vitamins, minerals and antioxidants and a source of fibre. But we need to be aware that fruits contain fructose, and fructose is a source of natural sugar that impacts on your blood glucose levels. So again, we're going to look at portion sizes in a moment. So all of the fruits in here apart from avocado. And then someone said crisps. So yeah, we've got crisps down here, and most of the foods down here have got sort of added sugars in. I think most people are aware that things like chocolate, sweets, ice cream, crisps are the foods that we need to limit because they've got the added sugars. Where else is there a natural sugar in our diet? Yeah? What's that sugar called? Lactose, yeah. So often one that people don't think about is lactose, and a little bit of milk in your tea, coffee, cereal is absolutely fine. It's just to be mindful if you're someone that drinks a lot of milk. Occasionally we get patients who might be drinking up to 12 pints a day, which is kind of, yeah, a lot, yes. So just be mindful of things like that. So, and yogurts as well, because yogurts have a little bit of a mixture. They've got lactose, but sometimes they also have added sugars, so you've got a double whammy of carbs in there. The good news is there are non-carb containing foods as well, so we've got our plain protein foods that are good for muscle growth and repair. We've got things like cheese and things like butter and oil, which are carb-free, as well as most of your vegetables and salad items. So what we want to try and do is recommend foods that give you a balance of all those different nutrients, because you're more than just your diabetes, you know, we're about preventing other things from happening. So You don't want to develop osteoporosis or high blood pressure or raised cholesterol. So we're trying to look at all of those things holistically. How we put that into practice. So this is the portion plate. This amount is aimed for weight loss. If you don't need to lose weight, you'd split those 3 groups into thirds. So in an ideal world, this is your main meal. You try and have a source of protein. So if it's meat, the palm of your hand, that might be a couple of eggs. It might be a piece of fish. We'd have a clenched fist portion or quarter of your plate carbohydrates, and we'd fill the rest of the plate with some sort of veg or salad. So that's kind of something that most people could realistically aim for.
So in terms of healthy living tips, so no matter what our lifestyles are, these are like common tips that we will be recommending, and you've probably heard of a few of these before. So the well-known 5 a day campaign, so encouraging 5 portions of vegetables, salad, fruits a day if we can. Generally like a palm-sized serving of a fruit would count as a portion, or a cupped portion of vegetables and salad is generally a portion size. And we really need our 5 a day for lots of the benefits that Georgette's mentioned, thinking about that fibre, all of those vitamins and minerals. And then whole grains. We do talk a lot about whole grains with healthy eating with diabetes. So thinking about whether there's anything that we can switch to that would be like a whole wheat, whole grain variety, whether it's switching from like white bread to like a seeded wholemeal bread instead, for lots of benefits. So it might be helping to regulate your blood sugar levels, so avoid the spikes in your sugar levels and allow like a flatter rise and fall. And it's also really good for our gut health, can reduce risk of things like colon cancer as well by increasing our whole grains. Lentils and pulses as well. These are easily left out of our diet, but we really want to be encouraging people to add more in. And as we go on, we'll find out a bit more about the prices of these foods as well. That might make it more encouraging. But lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, butter beans, any of these pulses, they're going to be low in fat, they're high in protein. They do contain carbohydrates, but it's trickled out really nice and slowly, so it's not likely to cause a spike in your blood sugar level. It's more likely to give us that sustained trickle of energy during the day. So if we're having a busy lifestyle, maybe we're working a busy shift at work, having a meal packed with lentils and pulses is really going to help keep us going. Oily fishes as well. How many portions of oily fish per week is recommended with diabetes? 2, yeah. So yeah, 2 portions of oily fish. So thinking about salmon, sardines, mackerel, pilchards. Any other fish where it isn't white in colour tends to be more of an oily fish. Really good for omega-3 oils, so works in a way that makes your blood less sticky and less likely to clot to form anything like a heart attack or a stroke. Vitamin D supplements, and when we mentioned earlier about supplements, whether they're needed, vitamin D supplements are the only vitamin supplements that are routinely recommended for the whole population, particularly during the winter months when we're not getting that sunlight to get the vitamin D. It's getting more and more common for people to be finding that they've got vitamin D deficiency, and a lot of us might have vitamin D deficiency and not even be aware of it. And it can affect things like our mood. We can feel quite low in mood if we're vitamin D deficient, which again is going to have an impact on our food choices and how we go about our daily lives. So it's normally at 10 microgram supplements of vitamin D that are routinely recommended. And other vitamin supplements, it may be that they're recommended on an individual basis if you do have a deficiency. Watching out for those processed foods. When we're busy on the go, it's very easy to think, right, I could just quickly grab that now. Probably costs a lot more as well because it's been pre-prepared. And often, if it's going to be processed, it's going to be higher in our fats, our sugars, our salts. So we really want to try and reduce down the processed foods, which is very difficult in 2024 because there's so much out there for us. But if we can get meals that we make from scratch, not only will it save money, but it will also improve our overall health. Staying active, so it's not all about what we eat, thinking about other aspects of our health and well-being. Thinking about the activity guidelines, how many minutes per day should we be aiming for? 30, yeah, so 30 minutes a day, at least 5 times a week if we can, but the more the better. It doesn't have to be in one lot of 30 minutes, it could be broken down into 5-minute slots, 10-minute slots. Includes gardening, housework, chair exercises if you find exercise more difficult. And there's lots of apps, if people like apps, things like the Active 10 app can help us to set small goals and gradually increase things like our steps across the day. Smoking as well is another really important factor that we do encourage people to consider if they are currently a smoker, to really reduce those risks of long-term complications associated with diabetes, as we don't want to be adding anything on if you already have very busy lifestyles. You don't want extra things in the mix that could be avoidable. Alcohol. Again, thinking about the alcohol guidelines, which are now the same for males and females, no more than 14 units per week. 1 unit would be the equivalent to like half a pint of 4% beer, a 25ml measure of a spirit, or a very small glass of wine, so about 125 mils of wine. So as part of a healthy balanced diet, you can have moderate portions of alcohol, but just being aware that they have the calories, the empty calories that don't give us that nutritional benefit. And again, thinking of costs, maybe introducing a few alcohol-free days per week would have that cost benefit as well of saving a few extra pennies. And another one as well that's really important not to forget is caffeine. We do get quite a lot of questions about caffeine and healthy eating and healthy diets. So for example, if you're having issues with sleeping day to day, if you work quite long hours, or if you have like carer commitments and you're just not getting adequate sleep every night, it's worth looking back at your diet and to think, actually, is there something that I could be changing? Because caffeine can take quite a long time for our bodies to process the caffeine, so it can stay in our system for well over 4 hours for a lot of people. So in some cases, we've encouraged people to limit caffeine after midday. Or it might be if you're working a shift overnight and having caffeinated drinks, to consider holding off taking any caffeinated drinks for at least 4 hours before the end of your shift, so that you can get a good night's sleep at the end of it. And really watching out for the particularly high caffeinated drinks, so things like the energy drinks as well, which obviously there's some that will have added sugar into them. So from our health point of view, we want to be going for the diet versions of those, but really thinking about our heart health, having too much caffeine is not good in the long run.
So you might all be thinking, yeah, this all sounds very familiar. I think I'm doing that already, or how do I put all that into practice when we talked earlier about all of those conflicting things that we've got going on. So sometimes it's to do with kind of the why, particularly some bad habits like I was mentioning earlier. So we've got a little acronym here. I remember it by the words RADAR, but it helps me remember some of the strategies that we can employ. So we know that actually sometimes we're emotional eaters. It's got nothing to do with our physical hunger. We're not hungry at all even, but something's happened that may have upset us, caused us stress. Sometimes we've been taught as children to be rewarded with food, something went well, so you're given food as a well done. And we've learned all these things over time, but sometimes we can meet that need in an alternative way. And it's just trying to think about, if you identify that your only kind of go-to is food, can you introduce some other things into that emotional resilience toolkit? Can you find other ways to get that feeling of, comfort? For some people it might be running a bubble bath, it might be listening to some music, it might be reading a book. It's just being aware of if it's happening and then what you can try and do to replace it. Other times, if there's something that's your go-to food and you know that if it's in the cupboard, it doesn't matter, you know it's there, it's calling to you, you know you've got that packet of biscuits, and you know that if you open the packet, you can't just stop at one, you're going to eat the whole packet. We would really recommend that you try and not have these foods in the house, Don't put yourself under that pressure. Or, we know it also works if you put them out of your eye line, so if you put them in the top shelf or you hide them behind other things, you can actually forget sometimes that they're there. The other thing that psychologists have studied is something called surfing the urge. And science tells us it can take up to 45 minutes to surf one of those cravings. So if you can employ a distraction technique, you might find after 45 minutes that you don't actually feel like you need to give in to that craving. Or if you are feeling hungry, or actually you still have that craving after 45 minutes, then I think it's also advisable to have those healthy snacks available. So have those in your eye line, have the fruit bowl on the table, open the fridge and have your snacks there or in the cupboard. because that's more likely to encourage you to kind of go for a healthy option. An interesting thing to also do, especially for people who like to eat when they're watching telly, is to ask yourself the question, would I want this packet of crisps if I was going to sit at the table with no telly on, nothing else on? Would I be sitting here by myself eating that packet of crisps? And often people will turn around at you and say, no, I wouldn't be sat on my own at the dining table eating the packet of crisps. But it does encourage you to be more mindful. So if you can avoid those distractions, like the telly, you're likely to find that you're not easily just eating a shared packet of chocolate or bag of crisps. So just trying to think of some of those things to sort of introduce. But it's called Radar, and they do really work, so just try and practice some of those if you can.
And so thinking about snacks, so linking in with the healthy snacks, and also thinking back to the Eat Well guide that Georgette was discussing at the beginning, when we're trying to think of actually what snack would be a healthy option, it's thinking of which foods would include those different food groups. What would be like a protein-rich food, something with high fibre content, so thinking about the veg, the salad, the whole grains. And it might be pairing those together because they do work well as a team, so things like adding that high fibre to a whole grain, it's going to trickle out the sugars, or a high protein snack, it's going to keep us fuller for longer. If you work during the night time, it's not advisable to have too many carb-heavy snacks that are going to make us feel like a lot more sleepy, but actually going for like more protein-rich snacks that are going to keep us more alert during our work hours. So let's see some different healthy snacks. I'm not going to list them all out here, but just to give a few ideas. And we have got some booklets on our table as well that have got some snack ideas if anyone wants anything written down to take away today. And it might be a case of looking at what you have at the moment, whether there's any healthy switches that you could make, but also thinking about your eating pattern. And some people often think that snacking is bad, but there's no right or wrong with eating routines. Some people are more snackers, some people like to stick to their 3 set meals a day. But with snacking, it's thinking about sometimes we might be making healthy changes other aspects of our diet, like reducing our portion sizes at a previous main meal. And as we're doing that, we might get those hunger pains. They might be a bit unexpected. So like Georgette said, it's about being prepared and having those snacks prepared in advance so that you've got something that you could reach for that, and not feeling guilty for that, just thinking actually it might, if you didn't do that, could that hunger pain get worse and worse, and then we would be more likely to crave a high sugar, high fat alternative. Oh, I left that last one, so not to forget the raw vegetables and the portion of fruit is a healthy option. We've got more in there than I thought. So we're going to the next one.
How much do you pay attention to how much things are now costing? Are you all noticing that maybe things are getting more expensive? You're now sometimes seeing in shops they've actually sort of put a padlock on some things. And it's like, wow, you know, butter's now got a padlock on it. You're like, wow, what's going on?
And smaller.
Yeah, smaller, yeah.
Butter cakes used to be about that big. Now they're
Yeah, that's an easy way to make you think, that they're not putting the price up, but they're giving you less for your money, absolutely. So we've been doing a lot of research into kind of predicting what things are going to get more expensive. I think we found out that olive oil is one to watch. Olive oil is going to get very expensive in the future. So yeah, start to kind of be aware of what's going on. So we're going to play a game. I want you to join in with us. It's very simple. You're just going to tell us whether you think the item, when we introduce it, is higher or lower. And it's going to hopefully show the difference between sort of the healthy and the better choices. So we've got low, these are all very generic, these are across all the brands, so it's not brand specific. We've got a low sugar, sort of non-chocolate coated cereal versus kind of one of the more high sugar chocolate coated ones. Which one do you think is the lower priced one?
That is correct. So for the oats, the non-sugar, the low sugar options, and the low sugar cereals, it's £2.33 per average 500 gram packet, whereas it's £2.73 for the same amount in the higher sugar options. So it does show that actually the healthier alternatives will be the cheaper. Any guesses what is the cheapest cereal to have? Yeah, you're quite right. Perfect. And yeah, the bigger the oats, the better. And also, just bearing in mind, that the sachet oats that would be more expensive. You know, when they tend to have the sachets portioned out, they tend to be a bit finer. Sometimes they might have added things into them, some added sugar, so we'll spike our sugar levels a bit more quickly, but those would be more expensive, so something to remember.
Thank you. Next we've got move the clicker along.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot I was doing the clicker. I thought it just magically changed.
So we were talking about whole grains earlier. So we've got some white bread and we've got some wholemeal bread. What do we think about price difference here? Okay, yeah. This one might surprise you because actually they're identical in price. So it doesn't cost you more to choose a whole grain option if you can. So it's not true that white bread is cheaper.
What about sourdough?
Sourdough, yes, sourdough could be more expensive, yeah, but wholemeal bread would still be kind of higher in fibre. But if you can afford sourdough, yeah, it's also kind of have a low impact on blood glucose levels.
Yeah, and the recommendation is to try and make at least 50% of our choices of grains and cereals whole grain if we can. So we were saying earlier, weren't we, that sometimes it might be like, oh, I could switch to whole wheat pasta, but I don't want to switch to whole wheat noodles. But if you're trying to do at least 50% of those, then it means you're doing really well. So don't feel like you're failing if you can't do all of them.
Would granary be better than both of those? Because you've got the grains in the bread.
Yep, granary would be a really good option. If you've got wholemeal but also with bits and seeds in, those bits and seeds take a lot longer to digest, and you're also getting extra vitamins added to the bread as well. So we would encourage bread. I often say bread with bits would be a good option to go for. So if we go on to the next one.
We've just got a couple of vegetable options. So we've got carrots versus broccoli. Which do you think is the cheapest?
Carrots.
I think that was a unanimous decision, you're quite right. So carrots are actually only 80 pence per kilo on average. The broccoli is £2.53 pence per kilogram on average. But it's always worth remembering that frozen, tin varieties of vegetables will still count towards that 5 a day, and actually you can even argue that some of them retain the vitamins and minerals even better, and they would be a cheaper alternative to some of those. And also thinking about what's in season, the prices will fluctuate. These are based on the prices about this time of year, but the prices will fluctuate. Or you may, if you have the option or the freedom to go to supermarkets and go to the discounted section, sometimes you can get them nearer to their best before date and get them a bit cheaper. Oh yeah, wonky.
Unwanted shapes and sizes.
Carrots will go up though because tons, I think it's 80 tons rotted in the fields last year. Because I watched Country.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
And
interesting.
the farmer said nobody ever speaks about root vegetables, but they were carrots just rotted in the fields.
Yeah, that's the shame, because we do think about like diet sustainability as well, and the fact that actually the weather, things like increased rainfall has been affecting crops in certain areas as well, so it can affect quite a few things. That's why the olive oil is linked to the olives as well, in fact the conditions that I think they predicted it was going to go up to like £9 to £17 per litre by the time we get to 2030. So it's quite scary, but hopefully things won't go up as much as they're predicting.
Berries, so we've gone for some fresh berries versus frozen berries, and again this is based on this time of year for the pricing. Which do you think is lower?
Yeah, you're quite.
So in this, because we're coming out of the kind of season for berries. It's actually the frozen berries at this time of year that will be cheaper. Perhaps in the summertime, the fresh ones would work out cheaper.
Yeah, so it works out about £2.99 per kilo of frozen berries compared to a whopping £12 per kilogram of fresh. But remembering that price will go down when they are in season. But obviously, even when they're in season, you can see there probably is quite a big price difference. And nutritionally, there's not going to be a difference. If anything, like we said earlier, sometimes the vitamins and minerals can be a bit higher in the frozen. So just not forgetting, like, for example, if you're adding it into things like your porridge and your cereal, having that frozen bag there, because you're less likely to have waste as well if we are opting for things that are non-perishable items. And also, like a fact about berries is that they do tend to be a lower carbohydrate fruits as well. So they tend to have less of an impact on our blood sugar levels. So still a really good one to be including within the diet.
So yeah, this time I've got tomatoes, fresh tomatoes versus the tinned variety. Which one do you think is cheaper? Well done, yeah. I think that was unanimous as well.
Yeah, so tinned is about £1.58 per kilogram, and then £3.18 per kilo of the fresh tomatoes. And it's worth thinking of like how we can save money by utilising more tinned tomatoes. So thinking about sauces, making your sauces from scratch using the tinned tomatoes, adding things like your garlic, your spices to the tinned tomatoes, rather than going for a pre-made jarred sauce will save a lot of money, because you can get some tinned tomatoes as cheap as about 35 pence in some supermarkets. So it's worth taking advantage. And obviously tinned tomatoes still going to be one of our 5 a day and have those vitamins and minerals.
The only trouble is you can't put a tinned tomato in a sandwich, can you?
No, that's true. That's very true.
You need the fresh tomatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that is a good point. There might still be a need that you'll choose. And obviously we can all choose our favourites to add in within our budgets.
So we've got some cooked meats already pre-prepared. We've got slices of ham or slices of turkey. Which do you think are cheaper?
Turkey.
Oh, we've got a little bit of a mixture this one. So it's not much of a difference, but turkey has come out slightly cheaper on the food index prices, very slightly.
Yeah, £2.30 for the turkey for an average 100 to 200 gram pack, and for the same weight it's about £2.60 for the ham. So very similar, but still cheaper for the turkey option. So it means that going for that lower fat option can still save a few pennies. It's a good source of protein, but we do say to watch out for how much we have of a processed meat and try not to have too larger portions or too often because of things like the salt content of those. But if we do go for them, go for chicken slices, turkey slices will be the healthier option.
I think we've just got a couple more. So this time I've got some pulses versus, so these are sort of alternative plant-based source of protein versus an animal source of beef mint. Which do you think is cheapest?
Pulses.
Another unanimous one. Yeah, you're right, absolutely.
Yeah, pulses actually are only 67 pence per kilo on average, whereas beef mince is £8.30 per kilogram. So a massive saving on this one. And also as part of sustainability as well for the environment, it is a good switch to make, as well as helping to reduce down things like our saturated fat intake within our diet and our total calories. And remembering that pulses do actually count towards our 5 a day as well. So again, thinking about those meals that we can sneak them into, so things like a chili con carne, it might be that you still have some beef mince within your recipe, and that's absolutely fine, but why not cut down on the amount of mince that we have in our recipes and bulk it out with pulses, so extra beans, or it might be a lasagna, adding some lentils into a lasagna. Fajita wraps, adding things like some butter beans in, and cutting down on the meat content as well. So you might have lots of different ideas of things that you use already, but any way that you can sneak them in can really help. And it means that your meals last longer. You might make a meal for 4 normally that then goes to stretch for 8 people, so you could freeze some portions to use for other meals.
I've got another meat one here. So we've got beef versus chicken. Which do you think is cheaper?
Chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah, £3.38 per kilo for a chicken versus £12.44 per kilogram for the beef joint. So again, thinking about the Sunday roast dinners, there could be ways that we can save money there. And again, much lower saturated fat intake content for the chicken. And we do say if you have red meat daily, to really try and swap to lower fat protein alternatives. So things like your chicken, your turkey, your fish, the lentils, the pulses, or vegetarian alternatives like tofu, corn, soya mince, any of those.
There's a big difference between chicken and organic chicken. Is there a difference nutrition-wise?
I think we would argue that maybe organic would have a slightly more nutritional content, but I don't think it's going to be massive from like the because they're a good quality source of protein, whichever one you choose. So I don't think it would be a noticeable change in like your overall health with those. So not to worry if you do need to go for the cheaper one. Things like our cooking techniques, how we cook these meats and things are more likely to have like a bigger impact on us. Would you agree with that one? Is there anything else you'd add?
Yeah, I don't think you need to necessarily buy organic unless that's a personal choice. And obviously, yes, it will cost more, but the health benefits aren't as great, yes, than the other things. And they are, the good thing about protein sources is they're pretty much carb-free, so don't impact on blood glucose levels. So that's always a positive as well. I think this is the final one, isn't it?
Before you carry on,
Yeah.
what about free range?
Free range, yeah. I think these are all very much personal choices. Obviously, yeah, how your chicken is being fed can be very important to people. So you may want to pay extra for that peace of mind, but it's not something that you have to pay extra for if you can't afford to. Yeah, and I think a lot more food producers are becoming aware that people want to buy from ethical farms and things like that. So I think that that's becoming kind of normal practice as well, more and more. But definitely things like eggs and things like that, yeah. Free range eggs are kind of pretty much available and they're not actually that much more expensive, are they?
No. But yeah, I think a lot of the time it's people think from ethical reasons and whether if they can afford it, then they often will go for things like the free range. But yeah, we've got 2 more of these.
Okay, so we have got fish as an example. So which is more expensive or which is cheaper? So let's do cheaper, is it? Which is cheaper? The fresh? Yeah.
Yeah, so £5.15 per kilogram of tinned fish compared to £19.43 of the fresh fillets. But also bearing in mind that we could go for frozen fish fillets that will be cheaper than going for it fresh. And another one that can be handy to have in the freezer to avoid potential waste, so you can easily grab it as and when needed. Tinned oily fish can count as your omega-3 portions as well, and can be a cheaper way to get those. So things like tinned sardines, tinned mackerel, tinned pilchards can be a good source of protein to be included into our meals. With tinned tuna is the only exception where it wouldn't count as one of those omega-3 portions because it loses some of that omega-3 in that tinning process. But tinned tuna is still a healthy protein choice because it's going to be nice and low fat and lean. So still include tuna in your diet if you do like that. Last one.
So both frozen, you've either got frozen vegetable or frozen beef burger, which is cheaper.
Yeah, so for 4 beef burgers, it's £3.50 on average, and for 4 veggie burgers, at £1.80 on average. So again, another way that we could switch to having less saturated fat in our diet, help for our cholesterol levels, and also, again, save money.
So we're just giving you some kind of ideas of some healthy breakfast, and hopefully these are some of the things that you're already eating, and if you are, give yourself a big sort of well done. Porridge, like we said earlier, is quite a kind of very cheap option for breakfast. You can jazz it up with your handful of fresh fruit. Whole grain bread, we've said, where possible. Adding egg is your source of protein. Low sugar mueslis, you can make your own as well to make sure there aren't those added sugars. Things like plain or Greek yogurt are better because they have only the lactose without the added sugars, and you can flavour them yourself again with like your fruit or add nuts and seeds for protein. And sometimes you can have a completely carb-free breakfast, so you could have something like an omelette as well, which would mean that you're having no carb impact on your blood glucose levels.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You didn't mention honey so far in your talk at all.
Yeah, honey is another type of added sugar. So honey, yes, it can have its health benefits. It's got sort of antibacterial properties, but if you see it sometimes listed in a food where it isn't naturally found, it is just there as another added sugar. So actually, you do have to be careful because sometimes yogurts might have honey pictured on the top, or the oats come with honey. There's no need for that honey to be there. That's just another way of adding sugars that impact on your blood glucose levels.
I always like sultanas in my porridge. Is that a good or a bad thing, really?
Is that sultanas?
Sultanas, yes.
Yeah, sultanas do have, they're obviously dried fruit, so dried fruit have a higher concentration of sugar.
Yeah.
So portion size is key. Where we say a handful of berries, which is about 80 grams,
Yeah.
we'd say the equivalent would be 30 grams in the dried sultanas. So it would just be the portion size to be mindful of. But when you're eating foods in combination, your body isn't just digesting the carbs in the sugar, it's also digesting the protein and the fat in the yogurt and other things you're having with it.
Yeah.
So that slows down the release of sugars, so it's a good combination.
Okay, thank you.
So why in the up there you've got low fat milk?
Yeah.
In the diabetic UK they sell a low carb cookbook.
Yeah.
In there they use whole milk.
Yeah.
They use loads of cream in their recipes.
Which booklet is that? Is that
The
the...
low carb diabetic UK, bought from the Diabetic UK Society.
So it does depend, because there's two different charities. One is diabetes.co.uk and one is diabetes.org. And sometimes... UK. Yeah, so that isn't necessarily so much, what's the word I'm looking for? Endorsed and regulated. So they do tend to take the approach of maybe very keto approach of very, very low carb and replace the carbs with having more whole fat. So full fat milk and butter and things like that. And yes, that can work for some people, but bearing in mind that full fat products do have extra calories, if people are trying to watch their weight, they might not need those extra calories. So I don't personally mind if people have a preference for full fat milk.
No, it's just,
but
it's just, it makes it very confusing.
yes, yeah, and that's why they're not necessarily a website that the NHS would endorse, because sometimes they're kind of going against the evidence-based advice. So we would often actually suggest going to the diabetes.org, or DRWF also have a healthy eating booklet, and that's been, regulated by healthcare professionals looking at it. So it is a case of looking at the sources of where you get your information. And unfortunately, some, even though it says it's written for people living with diabetes, it doesn't necessarily mean it's been written by the right healthcare professionals. Trying to say it in a diplomatic way. But generally, lower fat milk would be sort of semi-skim milk would be suitable for most people. But if you're trying to put weight on, then full fat milk is great. Yeah. Yes.
You're saying jacket potatoes, which I must admit I do myself. I do like a jacket potato. It doesn't have a lot of carbs in it.
It does have carbs because it's obviously potato and it's starchy, so it's all about context of portion size. So if you all clench your fist, because it's not my clenched fist you should be looking at, if you clench your fist, it sort of gives you a proportion of what your jacket potato portion size should look like. And that's the recommended portion, and only having one for clenched fist portion. So that should be enough.
Potato is mashed.
Yeah.
Last year, in this same thing.
Yeah. It can release the sugars quicker.
They said it releases the sugar
more
quickly than a box of chocolates, and the sugar goes into your
I
So
wouldn't-
you should have new potatoes with no butter or anything.
So if you get, that's not untrue, definitely, because chocolate is slow releasing because it's quite high in fat. That's what they're saying. Mashed potato on its own has already been partially processed, and the digestion process is already in place. So it does release sugars quicker. However, you don't tend to eat mashed potato on its own. You tend to have it with your protein and your vegetables, and all of the foods you eat together work to kind of slow down the release of the sugars in the mashed potato. So probably would just say don't avoid having instant mash on its own, because that would affect things quite quickly. But eat a balanced meal and you'll be absolutely fine. Yeah.
Sorry, again, you had said risotto on there. I thought rice was quite high in
so all of those meals would be in context of portion size. So you still have to sort of still aim for sort of this quarter of a plate or third of your plate to be made up of the carbs, and it's the other things within the meal that balance things out. So it's thinking about what you eat in combination. As we look through with the snacks, you're not just eating sometimes things in isolation. And also you can do things like exercise. If you did have a higher carb meal, if you do some walking or running up and down the stairs or some quick vacuuming, that will actually lower your blood glucose levels quite quickly. So it's kind of taking some of that pressure off and trying to just think, actually, do I eat a balance of foods? Then you're doing all the right things.
And so we've just got a couple last slides to just round up with some top tips to take away today. So our first one's about healthy eating as a family, and it might be that you have children, grandchildren, and tips that can help you all together. And it might be that you don't necessarily all have diabetes, because this applies to everyone. So involve family in the meal planning. So almost like writing a shopping list together. Forward planning can avoid impulse buying at the supermarket, making sure that you've got well-balanced meals ahead of time. Cook in bulk and freeze portions can be another tip that people choose to follow. It can save money doing that when we buy things in bulk, and also be more practical for our busy lifestyles. Stock up on cupboard and freezer essentials. Those ones we've been mentioning today, like the frozen berries, tinned varieties like tinned fish, can come in really handy. So you've always got a quick grab, easy meal that can be made in like 5 minutes time. But be mindful of snacking and eating during food preparation. I would actually put my hands up. I've got 2 young boys. It's very tempting when I'm preparing their meals to think, oh, I might just have a little snack of that. But trying to like hold off and reduce that temptation. Maybe it's actually by making sure that you all eat a meal together if you can. Try and find some common meals that you all like to eat together, so you're eating at the same time. And top tips for eating well on a budget. So some of these will cross over. So again, it's like planning those meals ahead of time, that shopping list before we actually get to the supermarket. Looking at supermarket own brands, when we've compared the nutritional profiles of a lot of these, they've actually sometimes come out better for those value brands, those cheapest options. So don't think the price will reflect the nutritional value. Also signing up to like loyalty schemes within the supermarkets as well can save a lot of money. Watching out for waste. So again, thinking about things that will be non-perishable. Making things in bulk again will help to reduce waste by putting things in freezer portion sizes. More vegetarian options, trying to go meat-free at least once per week. Again, will help to save money. Use frozen and tinned vegetables. Look for end-of-day discounts as well when you have the yellow stickers to save that money. And cook smarter. Thinking about cooking techniques, if anyone's lucky enough to have something like a pressure cooker, that's meant to be the quickest way to cook certain meals. Air fryers, I heard someone mention. Yeah, so it can mean that you're reducing that time where you're waiting for an oven to heat up, and it sometimes can mean shorter cooking time. So again, that will save money. And also going for quick and easy, healthy recipe ideas that don't take so long to cook means we're saving money on our energy bills. So it's not all looking at the price of the food, it's looking at how we got to making that meal.
So obviously there's a lot to cover in 45 minutes. We've just maybe touched the tip of the iceberg, and we are available on the stand if you want to come and ask us any questions. But we like this, Rise of the Hungry Caterpillar, or those that have read that book. So try not to do, sometimes people try and do like an all or nothing approach, which works in the short term, but then they can't sustain it. So you can kind of go from all to kind of going back to kind of bad habits. But what we're trying to encourage is that slow, steady approach to making changes that is sort of 80-20%. So 80% of the time you're eating or following the healthy eating principles, and 20% of the time you're still doing the things you enjoy, like having a piece of cake, having a takeaway, enjoying a glass of wine. And if you've got it in that sort of 80-20 balance, then well done, you're doing really, really well. So yeah, it's not a case of all or nothing, you know. You are human, be kind to yourself, and most of all, enjoy food, don't fear it. And we're available on the stand, like I said, come and see us if you...
Can I just ask a question?
Of course.
Which would you deem as most processed then? A vegetarian burger that you buy in a supermarket, or a vegetarian, or a meat burger, where you can actually mince and onions and that together, and it's pretty unprocessed?
It does depend, because sometimes with burgers, it also depends on the quality of the meat, because sometimes a cheaper burger can sometimes have fillers and rusks and things in it as well.
I'm just saying that you can actually make a burger at home
quite
quickly,
as
opposed to a vegetarian burger. And a lot of vegetarian food is highly processed.
You do have to be careful, but you looking on the labels, definitely.
And there are some homemade veggie burger recipes as well that you can get hold of. So a lot of people are more aware of like things that you can get, like the turkey burgers that you can make as a healthy alternative. But do look out for veggie burgers that you can make at home, because then you take away, again, like you said, it's a really good point, because a lot of them on the supermarket shelves could be processed just like the others.
When you talk about oils, I mean, so you don't use a lot of oil. Is there a preference between olive oil and vegetable oil?
So The scientists say that what it's down to is sort of the boiling point of the oil. So olive oil is really healthy, especially extra virgin olive oil, but it sometimes works better on cold food, so as a salad dressing. Whereas if you're cooking, they sometimes actually say rapeseed oil is better at taking a higher temperature. Yeah, but sometimes you can also sneakily sometimes pay for something that says rapeseed oil that's really expensive, but if you look at the vegetable oil, it actually might be a rapeseed oil, yeah, and it's actually cheaper. So also just look on the back to see what the vegetable oil is made of, because that's the top tip as well.
Yeah, that's a really big money
Yeah,
statement,
money
actually.
statement.
Unfortunately, you're going to have to wind up there. because
Sorry,
we've got
everyone.
someone coming in a minute.
One last question, one last
Come on,
question.
come on.
Avocado pear. They
Yeah.
say that if you take an avocado pear in place of butter,
Yeah.
you get a decrease in your heart attack rate of
Yeah.
about 20%. But in your picture over there, I didn't see avocado pear on the top line.
Yeah, the reason we didn't have avocado is because it can be more expensive. So where we were focusing today on budget, we didn't include avocado because it can sometimes be a more expensive thing to be able to afford. But avocados do have really healthy fats in, so we encourage people